Welcome to second session on memory management. In the first session, we've learned what is memory. Memory, we had defined that memory is a device which allows us to store and retrieve informations. We had learned types of memory. That is, we had learned the types of memory. Where we had said memory can be various types based on the materials used. So, we had classified memory as a semiconductor memory, magnetic memory, optical memory, and we had discussed a bit about them. We had also seen that usually in a system memory is organized in form of a hierarchy. In a hierarchical fashion, and we had started talking about memory partitioning. While talking about the memory partitioning, we had said that memory can be partitioned in a static manner, that is, at the time of generating the system itself memory can be partitioned, and while we are partitioning we had discussed that partitions can be of a equal size or unequal size, and we had seen the issues pertaining to static partitioning. In the coming lecture, in the coming session, what we are going to do is we are going to talk about dynamic memory partitioning. So, we are going to talk here about the dynamic partitioning. In case of a dynamic partitioning of memory, memory is partitioned at a runtime, and it is partitions are of variable length and they can be a varying number, and the processes are exactly allocated as much memory as is required by the process. Here we would just see an example that how the dynamic partitioning functions. So, the figure here shows that we have a total 64 megabytes of memory, and we are saying that out of that 64 megabyte of memory, 8 megabyte of memory is taken by a operating system. So, there is a space which is reserved for the operating system, and operating system gets loaded there, and then 56 megabytes of memory is available for the various processes. So, in the next step, that is a figure number B, you would see that a process 1 requiring a 20 megabyte, and since total memory allocation, free memory available is a 56. So, this process 1 gets loaded and gets loaded into the memory and leaving a 36 megabyte of a free memory. At a next instance, we see that another process comes in that requires a 14 megabytes. So, that process gets loaded and leaving a 22 megabytes of a free memory. Eventually, we see here that we have a process 3 coming in which say requires 18 megabytes, and it gets loaded leaving only 4 megabyte of memory. We can see that as the processes they keep coming in the system, the memory will keep getting occupied, later on leaving a smaller size hole, a smaller size of a free memory. So, now at this juncture, if we get a process which requires probably a more than 4 megabyte of a memory, then we know that this particular process cannot be allocated memory because of the fact that enough space is not available in the system. At our next example, what we are trying to do is that for some reason, let us say that a process 2 gets swapped out at some point of a time, because another process is required to be loaded, or for some other reason, then in that case when process B gets swapped out, we find that we have a process in the system, we have a process 1 and process 3, and we have 2 holes, one of a 14 megabyte size and another whole of a 4 megabytes. So, eventually we see that total amount of a free memory which is available at this instance of time is going to be 18 megabytes. But please understand that if the memory requested memory, if there is a process which requires say 15 megabytes of a memory, even though we have a 14 plus 4 megabytes of a free space, that is a 18 megabytes, a process requiring a 15 megabyte cannot be loaded because the contiguous 15 megabyte of memory is not available in the system. At a next step, what we have tried showing you is that another smaller process comes in which requires a 8 megabyte. So, out of this 14 megabyte free space, 8 megabyte is consumed by the process 4 and it leaves out a remaining whole of a 6 megabyte. And in the next step we show that a process 1 has perhaps completed its job, so freeing up the 20 megabytes of memory, and since enough memory has been freed up, so the process 2, which was a swapped out process which was put onto the hard disk, can be swapped in and can be swapped in. So, in this diagram we see that process 2 has come in, process 4 is there, process 3 is there, and we have a holes, one whole of a 6 megabytes, another whole of a 6 megabyte, and final third whole of a 4 megabytes. So, we find that we have a free space which is scattered all over the place, and we have a total free memory which is 6 plus 6 12 plus 4, that is 16 megabytes of a free memory is there. So, eventually when the system is running, in case of a dynamic memory, we can very clearly see that small size holes are going to get created in the system, and the small size holes are going to be unusable holes, because if the processes which are coming in, they are of a bigger size, they will not be able to get accommodated. So we know that because the smaller size of a holes are getting created, we know that dynamic partitioning lead to creation of an unusable small size hole in memory, and this we call as a external fragmentation. And so the issue arises that is there any way of handling the external fragmentation? So one of the technique which is used for handling the external fragmentation is known as compaction, and compaction is a mechanism which pushes all the processes towards one end of a memory, creating a single large free block. We can very easily visualize that if such a thing is to work fine, where all the processes which are loaded in memory, they are required to be pushed towards one end of the memory, that would mean that the blocks which are loaded, their address binding is required to be changed, and this would essentially mean that to support a compaction system must support runtime address binding. Any system which is not going to be supporting a runtime address binding, compaction cannot be carried out. So, having talked about how the dynamic partitioning functions, the very next thing which we need to answer is that how the memory is going to be allocated to the requesting processes. So, one of the strategy which has been proposed is first fit strategy. In this strategy, we try to allocate the first hole that is big enough to meet the requirement of the request, and we find that if this strategy is the fastest in terms of implementation and execution, but it lead to kind of a small problem where what happens that front end of a memory gets completely loaded, and for us to search the free block at a later point of a time, the entire list is to be searched. Therefore, to overcome this particular issue where the front end of a memory is completely filled, it was thought that why not leave the first hole. So, in case of a allocation, what is being carried out is that as soon as the first request comes in, we start searching the free list. In the free list, we leave out the first fit, that is the first hole where the process can be fitted. We leave out that, we look for the next hole, and we try to load our memory in a next hole which will accommodate the process. This essentially leads to pushing the loading loading of the processes toward the end of the memory. It also leads to a small problem where probably the larger blocks of a memory get broken into a smaller size blocks. The another strategy which is suggested is known as a best fit. Here what is done, that we try to find out the smallest hole that is big enough to meet the request requirement. So, in this case we find that if this scheme is to be implemented, in this case we find that what we need to do is we need to search the entire list to find out the best fit, or and alternatively one can perhaps sort the free list based on the size. So, if we have a sorted list which is a sorted list based on a size, then probably we should be able to quickly find out the best fit. The problem with the best fit is that what it does, it leaves the smallest size holes. It creates a very small holes, and in this case, since the smaller holes are going to get created, eventually in the memory very small unusable holes will get created. It would lead to what we call as a external fragmentation, severe external fragmentation, necessitating the compaction requirement, so that the memory can be compacted and a large block can be obtained. The next strategy which has been proposed is known as a worst fit. So, the objective, in previous case the objective was to utilize the find out the best fit hole where memory can be fitted, but we have seen that this approach, the best fit approach, leads to holes which are of a smaller size, unusable holes. So, it was thought that why not use a strategy of a worst fit, find out the largest hole and try to put the process into the largest hole, which will lead to a larger size free holes becoming available, larger size free holes becoming available, and probably it will avoid the compaction frequency. In practice, we find that first fit, next fit and best fit performs better than the worst fit in terms of a storage as well as a speed. We have seen that static partitioning and static and fixed size partitioning, static and variable size partitioning, dynamic partitioning, all these things, they lead to external and internal fragmentation problems. To overcome the problems faced by static and dynamic partitioning, another partitioning strategy was proposed, which was termed as a buddy system. And in case of a buddy system, memory blocks are available in the size of 2 to the power k, and where k is going to be greater than some lower limit value, and there is a lower limit value L, and k is going to be less than some upper limit value. So the smallest amount of a memory which will be there, which can be allocated in the memory, can be 2 to the power L, and the largest chunk of a memory which can be allocated is going to be 2 to the power U. So in case of a body system, entire space available is treated as a single block. So assuming that U is the size, so total amount of a memory which is available is 2 to the power U, and if we find that there is a request of a size S which satisfies the expression that S is greater than 2 to the power U minus 1 and less than equal to 2 to the power U, then in that case the entire block can be allocated. The entire complete memory would get allocated to the requesting process. Otherwise, if we find that the request S, if this condition is not satisfied, we find that the request S is less than 2 to the power U minus 1, then entire memory is split into 2 equal bodies, and this process continues until a smallest block greater than or equal to S is generated. So as I had earlier also mentioned, that body system is a compromise to overcome the shortcomings of a fixed and variable partitioning scheme. We will just try to see that how, with the help of an example, how the body system operates. So here we have taken an example where we have said that we have a total amount of a memory which is available to U is 1 megabyte. So that essentially means that 2 to the power 20, where U value is 2 to the power 20, U value is 20, and let us say that we receive a request of 100K. So we find that 100K is less than, so we try to compute that our S being 100K, so we try to compute that S is greater than 2 to the power U minus 1. So in our case U is 20, so U minus 1 is 20 minus 1, that is 2 to the power 19. So it is greater than 2 to the power 19. We find 100K, 2 to the power 19 is 512K. So we find that S is smaller than 2 to the power 19. So that as a consequence, this 1 megabyte of memory is partitioned into 2 equal blocks of 512K and 512K. We find that since the request block is still smaller than 256, so once again the block is divided into 256 and 256, and further 256 is divided into 128K and 128K, and we find that if we divide 128K block further, we find that we will get a block size of 64K, and we know that 100K will not fit in 64K, so we need to use 128K block. So the request of 100K will get completed by using 128K block. Now let us see that the next request of 240K comes. Going by the same process, we find that the next request will be 240K. So we know that this is a free space, we cannot fill it there, but we have a 256 kilobyte which will fit the 240K request. So this particular chunk of a memory will get occupied. Let us assume that another request of 64K comes in. So we find that 64K, we have a 128K free block. 128K free block can be divided into 2, 64K and 64K. So 64K request C can be met by a 64K and leaving a 64K free here, and then we are showing that we make another request of 256K. So we find that in this part of in this half of a memory there is not enough space, so we go to the next half. We try to divide 512K into two equal bodies. 256 and 256, and a request D is made by one of the body, that is a 256K is allocated here. The next thing which we are showing here, that so this is at, so when the requests are continuously coming, we would see that a memory will keep getting allocated in this particular manner. Let us also analyze that what happens that when the memory gets freed up, how the need of a compaction etc. is avoided. So we will try to see that when the release occurs, how the memory is treated. So we find that we say that a process B is going to be released. So when we say a process B is going to get released, meaning to say that we are releasing a 256K. So you find that now this is a snapshot which will get created. This becomes a free, gets added to a free list. After this, when we release a process A, so we find that we have free space, 128K free space getting created here. Let's say that one more request comes, that is a 75K request comes in. So for this particular process, when 75K request comes, we know that it will fit into a 128K block. It is greater than 64K and less than 128K, so it will fit into a 128K block. So the block which was just released a while ago gets occupied by this. And then let us see that we say that a release C. So release C, that is this 64K block gets released. As soon, please notice this, that as soon as this 64K blocks gets released, now we have a two continuous 64 and 64K. So they get combined and they form a single 128K block. And let us say that okay, we release E, that is this particular thing gets released. So once you release this, then 128K becomes free, 128K becomes free here. So they combine to form a 256, and this 256 would get combined with the free 256 block, so forming a complete 512K block. And eventually when final process gets released, the D process gets released, what happens that we find we once again claim the complete memory. So in case of a buddy system, we can very clearly see that it's a technique where dynamically the memory will get allocated, and as and when the memory is going to get freed up, we would find that automatically the holes would get combined to form the larger holes. So this would to a certain extent avoid external fragmentation or shortcomings faced by static and dynamic partitioning. What we have seen till now is that either of the scheme, whether we carry out a static partitioning or dynamic partitioning, static partitioning with a fixed size block or variable size block, all of these things, they lead to some kind of a fragmentation. And we have seen that the fragmentations can be of two types. One is the external fragmentation. This is the case when we have variable size partitioning. This kind of a fragmentation occurs, and then we have another kind of a fragmentation which we call as the internal fragmentation. And in this case, what happens that this predominantly this occurs in a case where the memory allocation is of a fixed size and fixed size block. So what happens that it is always possible that the allocated memory may not be completely occupied, because the process requirement is lower than the size of the block. So this leads to a fragmentation, and we call this as an internal fragmentation. Usually, on an average, we can say that a 50% of allocated memory could get wasted. So this gives rise to what we call as a 50% rule, where we say that if there are n allocated block, there is a likelihood that 50% of the memory would get wasted. which is a lot of memory. For the case of external fragmentation, the compaction technique is utilized, which we utilize, and we find that for us to be able to achieve the compaction, one of the requirement is that runtime binding, that is the execution time by address binding, is required. And we also face a problem, we would also face a problem with the I/O, because what happens that if suppose a process has made a request for reading a block of data from a hard disk. Now the memory, in the memory the data transfer is going to be carried from the hard disk, the data is getting transferred into the memory, and if at that point of a time we are going to carry out the compaction, then the device which is DMA controller will not be able to carry out this information, because the request which has been sent to the DMA controller is that it needs to transfer the data from a hard disk to a specified memory location, and because of a compaction this location will get altered. So this particular problem, the I/O problem, can be solved by doing a I/O in a OS buffer, where entire the data should first be read into the operating system buffer, which is a fixed area, and once the data is transferred into the operating system buffer, then from the operating system buffer it can be transferred to the user area. For these strategies, the underlying assumptions have been that whenever a process requests for a certain amount of a memory, the entire amount of a memory is allocated to the process. Whatever is requested, complete memory is allocated to the process. In other words, we can also say that if there is a process which is of size of 100 megabytes, we would need to allocate 100 megabytes of a memory. And the second assumption which we have been, second restriction rather than assumption which is being made is that complete 100 megabytes of memory is to be allocated in a contiguous manner. We observe certain facts. We realize that loading the entire program in memory is wasteful. For an example, if we look at a Microsoft Office, we find that total packages in excess of 600 megabytes or close to 1 GB, and it offers a various functionalities. So it offers you a functionality in terms of inserting a table, or it offers you a functionality in terms of doing a spell check, grammar check, or formatting. At any given point of a time, not all the functionality is being used by all the users. So it is very, very evident that it is quite wasteful to load the complete program into the memory. So the question arises, can we load the part of a program on demand, the functionality which we are, let us say that we are currently going to be carrying out a spell check. So can we load only that part of a program which does the spell check in the memory? So this gives rise to a question that can we load on demand? If we try to think of this strategy where a load on demand is to be permitted, then immediately we can see that it is possible that when the demand arises, the number one, the memory may not be available at all in the system, whereas in a previous approach where a process was completely allocated memory before it was loaded into the memory. So entire memory was allocated to the process, whereas we are only in a second approach we are trying to load only that much, trying to allocate that much memory which is required by the process. So when the process makes a request, it is possible that that much memory is not available, the memory itself is not available. So we would need to handle that what happens in such a case. So probably the process would need to wait, and once the memory process would remain in a new state, and once the memory becomes available, then memory will get allocated and it will move from a new state to the ready state. The second thing can also occur, that the memory may not be, because of we've seen that because of internal fragmentation, internal and external fragmentation, we may find that memory may not be available in a contiguous manner. So these are the when we talk about a load on demand, we would need to carry out a runtime address binding, and we would also need to relax this condition that memory should be available in a contiguous manner. So we would try to look at a solution where we going to relax the assumptions that entire memory should be allocated in the beginning itself, and memory should be allocated in a contiguous manner. So we will see a strategy where these two conditions are going to be relaxed. So we find that with load on demand and discontiguous allocation, we would require something known as a logical address and something known as a physical address mapping. So logical to physical address mapping, the concept of a logical address and physical address is going to be explained shortly, and with this load on demand, again the partitioning, the size can be a fixed size and a variable size. So when we talk about a fixed size partitioning, this gives rise to a memory management technique which is known as a demand paging, and when we talk about a variable size partitioning, it gives rise to a memory management technique which is known as demand segmentation. So in coming slides, we will try to see both of these memory management techniques, and both of these memory management techniques are very widely used in current day systems. So when we are talking about dynamic partitioning, we say that memory is dynamically partitioned at a runtime and it is going to be allocated to a process. We are saying there would be a logical address, and logical address is a reference to memory location independent of a current assignment of data to memory. We will see that what is the meaning of a logical address. Shortly we will see. Usually we find that logical address space is divided into a fixed size small chunks, and the size of small chunks can vary from 4 kilobyte to 4 megabyte, and in this scheme the physical memory is also divided into a fixed size chunk, and these chunks are known as frames, and usually the size of a frame and page is kept equal, and usually the frame and page sizes are of power of 2. This is essentially done for the ease of address computation. Let us see an example. So in this example, what we are trying to depict, that we have a program, and program, as we know that program is a set of instructions. So this particular diagram shows that we have a program with say 8 instructions present. So we have an instruction 1, 2, 3, I1, I2, I3, I4 and I8, and logically speaking, if we count the instruction numbers, we say that 0 is instruction number 1 is having an address 0, instruction number 2 is having an address 1, and so on. So the instructions are numbered like this. You have instructions numbered as a 0 to 7 in a given program. So we know that we know how the program gets executed. Program usually when program starts executing, we find that there is a program counter inside the processor, and the program counter is to begin with initialized with the value 0. So, from the location 0 it fetches the first instruction, decodes, executes, and while it is executing it increments the program counter value by 1. So, logically after executing the instruction 0, the program counter value will get incremented and it will come to a 1 and so on. So, in this way in a sequential order the program execution will be carried out. So, the address generated by the processor is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and so on. This address will only get altered if the executing instruction is a instruction which is a branch instruction. So, this is what we have already we already know. This is how the programs they get executed. So, the program counter generates an address which we call as a logical address. Now, since we are going to talk about a load on demand. So, here I am indicating a total memory space of a 12 bytes, and what I have said that I have assumed here that entire memory is divided into a fixed size, that is a 4 byte size. So, I have this has a first 4 byte, then this has another 4 byte, and then this has a third 4 byte. So, the total memory can be divided in this particular manner. Now, on demand loading, it is possible that when in the beginning when a program started executing, instruction 0, 1, 2, 3 they were required to be loaded. So, they got loaded in this case, and I am assuming this is a place which was initially filled up. At a some later point of a time when for this particular program the remaining instructions were required to be loaded, say instruction number 4, 5, 6, 7, then this was a free area which was available and it is possible it will get loaded here. So, now one can see very clearly that the processor is going to generate the addresses which is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So, you find that address 4, that is a corresponding to instruction 5, but instruction 5 is physically stored at a address 8. It is not physically stored at a address 4. So, this address we call as a logical address, and after loading the page into the memory, the address where it is loaded we call it as a physical address. So, one can very clearly see that one would require a logical to physical address mapping. I would say that address 4, if one needs to look at a content of the address 4, then one needs to go to a physical memory location 8. For address 5, one needs to go to a physical memory location 9 and so on. So, logical to physical address mapping is required, and this is a concept of a logical address and physical address. Logical addresses are the addresses which are generated by the processor. Physical address is actual address which is there in the memory. So, how on demand, when we going to use a technique load on demand, then how the memory is going to be allocated. So, we assume that when a process page is required to be loaded into the system, OS operating system would allocate the required number of frames and where the process pages are to be loaded. And again there is a question that what is the number of frames which OS should allocate. This question we would try to answer a little while later. And we also understand that for the allocation process the frame need not be allocated in a contiguous manner. And if we take an example that let us say that we have a process of a size 13 kilobytes, and if we say that a page size is of a 4 KB, so the allocation is in an integral multiple of a page size. So, for us to be able to load a 13 KB of a program, we know that we would require 4 frames. First 3 frames would be completely filled up, that is first 3 frames would fill up 12 KB. So, out of 13 KB of a program, 12 KB would get filled by the first 3, and remaining 1 KB will get filled in the last frame, that is the 4th frame. And if we try to now compute the overall wastage, we find that we only have a 18% of the wastage which is occurring in this case, whereas in previous case where we were talking about a fixed size allocation and we had a 50% rule, and on average it could have led to a wastage of wastage of a 50% of memory. So, we can very clearly see that there is a reduction in terms of a wastage of memory. Here is an example of a logical to physical address mapping. So, in this case we are trying to usually what happens that the total amount of physical memory which is available in the system is going to be much lower than the logical address space. For an example, we know that if we are using a say Pentium processor has 32 address lines, and 32 address lines would mean that the total amount of a memory which can be interfaced with the Pentium processor would be 2 to the power 32, and that would mean that it is a 4 gigabytes. And we would have seen that we have a machines with a 2 gigabytes of a memory, or we have a machines with 1 gigabyte of memory. In some cases, yes, we can have a machines with a 4 gigabyte of memory, but it is not always that the total amount of a physical memory which is going to be available is going to be what is the maximum amount of memory that can be present in the system. So, more often than not, the total amount of memory which is going to be available is going to be less than the maximum amount of memory which can be there in the system. So, as a consequence, what happens that but we want to load a program, we want the user to load a program which will be of the maximum size program. So, because for the reason that we know that processor, if we talk about a Pentium processor has a instruction pointer which is of a 32 bit. So, Pentium processor while executing the instruction will generate an address which will be in a range of a 0 to 4G minus 1. So, what we do that we take the logical address, and these logical addresses we divide into a fixed number of pages. So, if we say that page size is of a 4 kilobyte, so for the case of a Intel processor where we have a 32 address 32 bit IP, so 2 to the power 32 divided by 2 to the power 12, that is a 4K. So, we will get a 2 to the power total number of 2 to the power 20 number of pages. So, a given logical address space can be divided into a number of pages, n number of pages, and all these pages are going to be of fixed size. In same way, given the physical memory can also be divided into a number of frames of equal size. So, the page size and a frame size in the scheme are going to be same. If the page size is going to be of a 4 kilobyte, frame is also going to be of 4 kilobyte. Now, it is possible that when the program is getting loaded, it is possible that the page number 0 will get loaded into a frame number 1, and page number 1 will get loaded into a frame number 0. It is not always necessary that page 0 will get loaded into a frame 0 and page 1 will get loaded into a frame 1. It is not always necessary. We can because it is quite possible that the time when page 0 was getting loaded, only frame 1 was free, so it got loaded there, and later on when page 1 request came, by that time frame 0 had become free, so it got loaded there. So you can very clearly see that there would be a physical pages which will be mapped to a there would be physical pages, there would be a logical pages, and logical pages will be mapped onto the physical pages, physical frames. We take an example. We would try to deal. We will try to deal with the x86 processor in a greater detail in coming slides. Here we trying to take an example and a related issue of address translation when we talk about demand paging. So we are taking an example of x86 processors. We find that in case of Intel, the memory is byte organized. When we say a memory is byte organized, this essentially means that each memory location is of byte sized, and the particular processor example, if we run through from Intel 8386 to Pentium 4 processor, you would find that they had a 32-bit IP address. Their IP instruction pointer register was of 32-bit. So the logical address space we are talking about 2 to the power 32, that is a 4 gigabytes, and these Pentium processors, they physically they had a 32 address lines. Therefore, we can see that the maximum physical memory which could have been connected to a Pentium processor was a 4 gigabyte, and Intel processor uses the page size, they uses page size of a 4 KB and 4 megabyte, but for our example we will take the example of a 4 KB and discuss the various issues. The basic address translation architecture, if we try to see, is something like this, that we find that we have a CPU which generates the address, and we said that this address is a logical address. So CPU generates the logical address, and out of this logical address, since the page size is of a D bit, so that D bit is used as an offset within the page, and the remaining part of a logical address gives me the page number. So the logical address can be conceived as having two parts, offset part and a page number. Now this page number, so we have said that we would require to map the logical address to the physical address. Logical to physical address mapping is required. So probably what we can do, we can maintain a table where corresponding to every physical page we store the information, where corresponding to every logical page we store the information of a physical frame. So you require one table. So for the time being, let us call this table as a page table, and page table will have the mapping information. So what we do, we take these p number of bits from here, the page value from here, go into the page table at a offset of a p and get the frame value. So we get the frame number, and this frame number we combine with the offset to generate the physical address. So this is a technique, this is how the logical address will eventually get translated to the physical address. So this is a basic architecture which most of the systems, current day systems, would follow. So for an example, the architecture concept which we had seen previously, we going to explain with the help of example. So we find that we take an example that, let's say that we require 4 pages, 4 pages in a logical memory. We have 4 pages in a logical memory which are to be placed in the physical memory. So they can be placed something like this, that page number 0 is placed at a frame number 1, page number 1 is placed at a frame number 4, page number 2 is placed at a frame number 3, and page number 3 is placed at a frame number 7. So, this logical to physical mapping, for that what we would require, we said that we require a page table, and the page table contents can be seen like this. So, 0, that is in the page table, the page number is used. I can visualize a page table as an array of frames, and where the index of array is page number. So, we find that page number 0, so at a location 0 in page table you find that the entry is 1, that is corresponding to frame number. Similarly, we can see that index at a index 1 in a page table, the entry is 4, that is page number 1 is stored at a physical frame number 4. So, this contains this page table contains basically the frame numbers. Let us try to see that how the frames are assigned in the memory, and let us see that how the memory would get fragmented over the period of time. So, in this example, what we are doing is we are taking an example with 15 available frames. Total number of frames available are 15. So, you find that 0 to 14. We are assuming that we have the first process comes in, and for that 4 frames are allocated. Since the complete memory is free in the beginning, so the allocation begins from the starting point. So, first 4 frames they get filled up. Then we are saying that another process B comes in which requires 3 frames. So, that those 3 frames get filled up, and now the remaining number of frames are going to be your 15 minus 7 frames, that is 8 frames are free. They are currently toward the end of the memory. So again we see here that next process comes, that is the process C comes in, and it requires 4 frames that gets loaded. Now, after this, let us say that a process B gets swapped out. So, when process B gets swapped out, swapping out means that the process B is taken out of memory and put onto the hard disk for some reason. So, if the process B gets swapped out, so we find that there is some memory which becomes free here and free here. So, this is how it is, and now at a later point of a time we see that another process comes in, a process D gets loaded. So, when process D gets loaded, you can see that if we are following the first fit strategy, this particular process will get loaded here, it comes and gets loaded here. It gets loaded here, but one thing we should see that the process D requires total number of 5 frames. So, there are 3 frames which are available here, and remaining frames are available here. So, 3 frames they get loaded here and 2 frames they get loaded here. We can clearly see that this is how the memory is going to be allocated in a discontiguous manner, and this is why why it will lead to a kind of a logical to physical address translation. For this example, so we find that we have 4 processes, and for each of the process we would require a logical to physical address mapping. That would mean that the page tables are required to be maintained on the per process basis. For every process one would require to maintain the page table. So in our case we find that we going to require a 4 page table, one for a process A, one for a process B, one for a process C, and one for a process D. Since we can see that at a particular point of a time toward the end, when end of the example, we've seen that process B has been swapped out. As a consequence, process B is not in memory, though the page, and that is the reason that the frame numbers are not indicated here. Probably the value which is here is, maybe it is containing the information about the address, hard disk address, where the process has been swapped out. It doesn't contains, currently it does not contains the physical memory address, and we would have a list of free frames. So the system would need to maintain a data structure maintaining a page tables and list of free frames. So till now what we have done, we have tried to see that in case we going to do a dynamic partitioning and we are going to carry out a load on demand, and while we talking about a load on demand, we have talked about a specific case of a load on demand where we said that partitions are going to be of fixed size. So we have discussed something about a paging. So till now what we have done, we have talked about paging, and we have talked about the basic architectures of address translation. In coming session, what we will try to do is, we will try to explore paging in a greater detail, and in addition to paging, we will also try to talk about another memory management technique, that is segmentation. Thank you.